1845. A mysterious fungus suddenly spread across the fields of Ireland. Within weeks, the potato plants that millions of people depended on for survival turned black and rotted underground. The air filled with the stench of rot. Over the next 7 years, nearly 1 million people starved to death. Another million fled the country by ship. But that's not the most amazing part of the story. The most amazing part is that scientists have recently discovered that the potato actually arose from a species accident. About 8.6 million years ago, two completely different plant lineages, one an ancestor of the tomato, the other a small underground tree, interbred. That hybridization gave rise to a plant that could produce large underground tubers for the first time. In other words, the potato is actually a distant relative of the tomato, a genetic accident that would later change the fate of human civilization. A lumpy, earthy tuber born from that accident would one day save an empire, make a king the potato king, and nearly wipe out a nation. Today's story is about the potato, the common vegetable that saved and then killed a nation. Let's get started. A study published in the journal Cell in 2025 overturned long-held beliefs about the origin of the potato. Both potatoes and tomatoes are members of the same plant family, Solanum, and were thought to be distantly related. But genome analysis has revealed a more surprising truth. About 12 million years ago, two plant lineages diverged. One was the ancestor of the tomato. The other was a genus called A. tuberosum, which produced small underground stems but never flowered and formed tubers. Then, about 8.6 million years ago, in Western South America, these two different lineages interbred. A gene from the tomato lineage gave the new plant the ability to form large tubers. This genetic combination gave the potato the ability to reproduce efficiently asexually, paving the way for its widespread spread into mountainous regions. Archaeological evidence also supports this story. Potato tubers dating back to 2500 BC have been found at a coastal site in central Peru called Incan, the oldest archaeologically verified evidence. And stone tool evidence suggests that potato use may date back to 3400 BC. Between 1500 and 500 BC, potatoes gradually became a staple food for humans throughout the Andes. Even chemical analysis of human skeletons has found evidence that potatoes, along with quinoa and llamas, were an integral part of the Andean diet. The potato wasn't just a food. It also profoundly influenced the art and imagination of ancient people in strange ways that still make you shiver today. The potato's influence is evident in ancient ceramic pottery from the Altiplano region of Peru. Clay pots were often made in the shape of potatoes. These pots represented the potato in three ways: as a direct vegetable, as a human figure, sometimes distorted, sometimes intact, or as a strange transformation in between. The fact that the potato was so widely represented in art demonstrates how deeply social its importance was. But the strangest part came from the Moche culture, a civilization in ancient Peru. The potato didn't have the same religious significance as corn, but the potato's swollen, distorted shape captured the imagination of its artists in a different way. They depicted potatoes as deformed animals and humans, evoking an artistic emotion known as the mundo horroroso, horrible world. Potato symbolic artwork also featured physical deformities and hallucinations. How a simple vegetable could create a nightmare world in the imagination of artists from an ancient civilization. That shows how deeply the potato was embedded in human thought. By the 1400s, When the Inca Empire dominated South America, the potato had become a household name. Inca farmers cultivated more than 3,000 varieties of potatoes on the slopes of Cusco and the surrounding mountains. Potatoes were a major source of energy for the Incas, their predecessors, and later, the Spanish conquistadors. The Andean people boiled, stewed, and roasted potatoes. They also made a dish called papas secas, a process of boiling, peeling, and chopping the potatoes, which were then fermented to make tocosh and ground into a starch called almidón de papa. But the Andeans' real economic invention was the chuño. Farmers would spread freshly harvested potatoes on the flatlands high up in the mountains, where they would freeze to stone in the bitter cold of the night. The next morning, when the sun was hot, the whole family would walk barefoot over the frozen potatoes, squeezing the water out with their feet. After a few days of this cycle, what was left was a light, dry lump like clay. Chuño could be stored for years without refrigeration, which was invaluable in years of famine or poor harvests. This long shelf life made it the staple food of the Inca army. And in a cruel irony, in the 16th century, the Spanish fed this same chuño to their silver miners, who were producing vast wealth for the Spanish crown. The food that once sustained the Inca Empire later helped their conquerors amass wealth. In 1537, a group of Spanish conquistadors became the first Europeans to come into contact with potatoes during a raid on an Inca village in Peru for gold and silver. They were busy counting the gold and silver. They had no particular interest in the vegetable that the locals ate with almost every meal. Interestingly, the potato actually reached Europe by two different routes. The first was directly to Spain around 1570. The second was via the British Isles between 1588 and 1593, probably brought by Basque fishermen from Spain, who carried potatoes as provisions for their ships as they crossed the Atlantic and landed in Western Ireland to dry cod. The first written mention of the potato is found in a delivery receipt dated November 28, 1567, from the Canary Islands to Antwerp. But even after learning about it, the Europeans refused to eat it. The Spanish conquistadors praised the potato, but they especially recommended it to the natives who had to do the heaviest work. That is, it was considered a lower class food. The same thing happened in England. The potato became a working class food. The first potato to be eaten on the continent was in a hospital in Seville in 1573. The botanist Carolus Clusius received tubers from the papal ambassador and planted them in Vienna, Frankfurt, and Leiden, spreading the plant widely across Europe. But at first, it was cultivated for its flower beauty, not for food. The botanist John Gerard even mistakenly thought the plant was native to Virginia. When the potato spread to Europe, reactions ranged from skepticism to outright horror. Europeans were growing wheat and barley, the great crops that grew above ground in the sunlight. Potatoes grew underground in the dark and were a member of the same family as one of Europe's most poisonous plants, the nightshade. People assumed this meant they were the creation of witches or the devil, earning them the nickname, the Devil's Apple. There was also a legal barrier in Northern Europe that few people know about. Field agriculture was governed by strict customs: when to plow, when to sow, when to graze animals, all tied to seasonal rules. Only crops were allowed to be planted in the open field. As a result, potatoes were forced to remain confined to small garden plots, deprived of the opportunity for large-scale cultivation. For about 200 years, the potato remained in European gardens as a mere curiosity. But after 1750, government officials and aristocratic landowners in France and Germany began to encourage the conversion of fallow land to potato fields. And the famine of the 1770s, government policies, and the cold climate of the time, the Little Ice Age, all accelerated potato adoption because potatoes were a viable option even when traditional crops were not growing reliably. The fate of the potato was changed by the clever tactics of a few stubborn rulers. In 1756, the Prussian king Frederick the Great issued an official proclamation making potato cultivation compulsory, known as the Kartoffelbefehl, or Potato Ordinance. The decree described the unfamiliar tuber as a highly nutritious food supplement. Frederick himself became known as the Kartoffelkönig, Potato King. But it was not easy to dispel the farmers' skepticism. Legend has it that Frederick planted a royal potato garden on the outskirts of Berlin and surrounded it with armed soldiers to guard it. The message was clear. If the king had soldiers to guard his own plants, they must be incredibly valuable. The farmers began to steal at night, just as Frederick wanted. Across the border, a pharmacist, Antoine-Augustin Parmentier, was fighting in France. While imprisoned by the Prussians during the 7 Years' War, he survived mainly on potatoes and remained remarkably healthy. Upon his return, he wrote a book in 1774 entitled Examen chimique des pommes de terre, Chemical Examination of Potatoes, extolling the nutritional value of potatoes. King Louis XVI and his court promoted the crop. Queen Marie Antoinette wore a potato flower crown at a lavish ball. The results were astonishing. France's annual potato production rose from 21 million hectoliters in 1815 to 117 million hectoliters in 1840. A growth so rapid that it allowed France to avoid what economists call the Malthusian trap, the stagnation of population growth due to food shortages. France still honors Parmentier in the name of the 80 Parmentiers dish made from potatoes in the Paris metro station. And in Germany, at the Sanssouci Palace in Potsdam, where Frederick the Great is buried, visitors still pay their respects by placing potatoes on his tomb. The potato became the most important new food crop throughout Europe in the 19th century. By 1845, it had taken over a third of Ireland's arable land, and about 10% of Europeans' total calorie intake came from this one crop. The Marxist philosopher Friedrich Engels declared the potato to be the equivalent of iron for its historical revolutionary role, because this cheap, high-calorie crop fed the urban workers of England who laid the foundation for the Industrial Revolution. But the potato's journey did not stop in Europe. It reached China at the end of the Ming Dynasty and became a delicacy for the royal family, and then quickly spread throughout China under the pressure of population growth. In India, British traders brought the potato to Bengal, and by the 18th century, it was cultivated throughout the northern highlands. The potato arrived in Africa through colonizers, at first simply as a vegetable. Local farmers initially resisted, believing it to be poisonous, just as it had in Europe. But by the mid-20th century, it was well established. In the highlands of Rwanda, potatoes became the new staple food. Before the horrific genocide of 1994, annual consumption was 153 to 200 kilograms per person, more than in any Western European country. The first confirmed potato crop in North America was planted in New Hampshire in 1719. The plants came from Ireland, hence the name Irish potato. Thomas Jefferson himself made it clear that the plant was not native to North America. A century later, Idaho would become one of the world's most famous potato-growing regions. An Andean mountain tuber crossed 4 continents, royal courts, and famine to become a truly global crop. But beneath this triumph was a terrible weakness. The main reason for the spread of potato cultivation in Ireland was the landless workers who rented small plots of land from landlords. An acre of potatoes and a cow's milk were enough to feed an entire family. But the lack of genetic diversity, coupled with the small number of varieties, made the crop extremely vulnerable to disease. In particular, a variety called lamper, tasteless, soggy, disease-resistant, but very productive, was widely grown in the west and south of Ireland. In the early 1800s, a Pathophthora infested strain called Herb 1 began to spread to America. In the 1840s, the blight reached Europe, and the crop was even more susceptible due to the extreme lack of genetic diversity. The blight hit Ireland hardest in 1845, as Britain had exported all other food, leaving only potatoes for Ireland. Between 1845 and 1849, the famine in the west and south of Ireland turned into a catastrophic failure of the food supply. About 1 million people died from famine and the diseases that accompanied it, and 1 million more emigrated to Britain, the United States, and Canada. This migration did not stop until the 20th century, when Ireland's population fell to less than half its pre-famine, 8 million. The consequences of betting everything on one breed, one clone. This lesson, taught repeatedly throughout the history of civilization, was learned in the most brutal way. The famine did not destroy the potato's reputation. It proved how indispensable it had become. In the 20th century, science came to the rescue of the potato. The Canadian Potato Research Centre in New Brunswick began developing disease-resistant varieties in the 1930s, becoming one of the world's leading potato research centers. And in the 1960s, Chilean agronomist Andrés Contreras did a remarkable job. He began collecting neglected local varieties of potatoes that had survived in the small gardens of elderly women on the Chiloé Islands, passed down through generations. His collection is now the basis of the Chilean Gene Bank, a living repository of the diversity that Ireland was doomed to lose. Today, the potato is the world's 4th most important crop, after wheat, corn, and rice. In 1995, it became the first vegetable to be grown in space. NASA and the University of Wisconsin successfully planted potatoes on the Space Shuttle Columbia. Scientists believe that if humans ever establish a permanent colony on Mars, the potato will be one of the first crops planted there. Think about it. A tuber that emerged from an accidental hybrid with the tomato 8.6 million years ago, a tuber that Moche artists considered a terrible world, was despised by the Spanish, and Europe feared was a creation of the devil. The same tuber that fueled a continent's industrial revolution, nearly wiped out a nation, and is now in the running to become the first crop cultivated by humans on Mars. The potato began as a genetic accident in the clouds of South America. Indigenous farmers turned it into something extraordinary. The Incas built an empire on it, and now scientists are trying to preserve its diversity and prevent another disaster. Not bad for a hunky tuber that no one wanted. If this story of the potato has surprised you, subscribe to Crumbs of Time. Every week, we reveal the hidden history of everyday foods. Tell us in the comments, what part of the history of potatoes surprised you the most? And like it, so more people can find this story. Thanks for watching the video.